The smoke was already thick enough to choke on. Captain Ryan Holt could barely see 3 feet ahead through the churning grey haze that filled the second-floor hallway like a living fog. The heat pressed against his skin, even through the heavy turnout gear, and the air tasted like ash and burning plastic. Somewhere below, timber cracked and popped as the flames consumed the structure from the inside out. His radio crackled with urgent voices. His team, his captain, the incident commander, all telling him the same thing. Get out. Get out now. The building's coming down. But he couldn't move, because Blaze wouldn't move. The German Shepherd stood planted in the middle of the hallway, muscles tense, ears pinned back, eyes locked on something Ryan couldn't see. The dog's scarred muzzle was low to the ground, and he was barking, not the sharp, alert bark of a search and rescue dog who'd found a victim, but something deeper, more desperate, almost frantic. It was a sound Ryan had never heard from him before, not in 2 years of partnership, not in dozens of rescues. The floor beneath them groaned, splitting in jagged lines that spiderwebbed across the worn hardwood. The walls glowed orange from the flames below, and the ceiling above sagged ominously, raining embers and flakes of blackened paint. The heat was unbearable. Sweat poured down Ryan's face inside his mask, stinging his eyes, blurring his vision. "Holt, get out now!" Captain Caruso's voice barked through the radio, sharp and commanding. "The roof's about to collapse. You've got 30 seconds, maybe less." Ryan reached for Blaze's collar, fingers closing around the worn nylon. "Come on, boy, let's go, we have to leave." But Blaze jerked away, twisting his body toward the wall, with a force that nearly knocked Ryan off balance. The dog lunged forward, claws scrabbling against the plaster, tearing at the surface with a desperate intensity. He barked again, sharp, insistent pleading, and that's when Ryan saw it. A faint, rectangular outline in the wall, barely visible beneath layers of white paint. Hollow, hidden. Ryan's breath caught. Blaze wasn't losing his mind. He wasn't panicking. He had found something. Someone, and whatever it was behind that wall. Ryan's heart hammered against his ribs. His training screamed at him to evacuate. The building was seconds from collapse. Every instinct told him to grab the dog and run, but Blaze's eyes, those molten amber eyes that had never once led him astray, were locked on his, burning with an urgency Ryan couldn't ignore. Trust. That's what they'd built their partnership on. Trust. Ryan pulled his Halligan bar from his belt, wedged it into the outline and pulled. The wall gave way with a sound like a sigh, and from the darkness beyond, he heard it. A child's muffled cry. 24 hours earlier, the world had been normal. Station 42 sat on the eastern edge of the city, a squat functional building of red brick and steel, with 3 garage bays, a training yard out back, and the perpetual smell of diesel fuel, burnt coffee, and the faint metallic tang of equipment that had seen too many fires. It wasn't glamorous. The paint was peeling in places, the floors were scuffed, and the kitchen table had more coffee rings than a tree trunk had growth rings. But it was home. Ryan Holt had been stationed there for 6 years. He knew every crack in the concrete, every dent in the lockers, every story behind every scar on every firefighter's hands. He knew which bunk creaked when you rolled over, which shower had the best water pressure, and which coffee pot actually worked. It was routine, predictable, safe. And after the chaos he'd seen in his career, the bodies pulled from wreckage, the families torn apart, the nightmares that never quite left, routine felt like a blessing. Blaze had been with him for 2 of those years. The dog had been rescued from a warehouse fire on the south side, a 3-alarm blaze that had engulfed an abandoned industrial complex. When the firefighters finally cleared the building, they found him trapped in a back office, malnourished, dehydrated, with second-degree burns along his left shoulder and haunted eyes that spoke of trauma too deep for words. The shelter had called him unadoptable, too anxious, too unpredictable, too damaged. But Ryan had seen something else. He'd seen a survivor. Training had been brutal. Blaze flinched at loud sounds, refused to enter dark spaces, and had nearly bitten a trainer during an early drill when the man moved too quickly. But Ryan was patient. He worked with the dog every day, slow, steady, consistent, building trust one command at a time, one touch at a time, one moment of calm at a time. And over months, something shifted. Blaze began to respond, to obey, to remember what it felt like to be part of a team, to be safe. Now he was one of the best search and rescue dogs in the state. He could detect a human heartbeat under rubble from 20 feet away. He could navigate smoke-filled rooms without hesitation. He could find people when machines and men failed. He saved lives. And he'd saved Ryan's life too. It had been a year ago, a high-rise fire in the downtown district. Ryan had gotten disoriented on the 8th floor, separated from his team, oxygen running low. The smoke had been so thick he couldn't see his hand in front of his face. Panic had started to creep in, the kind that killed firefighters, when he felt Blaze's nose press against his leg. The dog had backtracked through the maze of corridors, leading Ryan to a stairwell he'd missed. They'd made it out with 30 seconds of air left in Ryan's tank. Ryan owed the dog his life, and he never forgot it. On that particular morning, the morning before everything changed, Ryan woke to the sound of his alarm at 5:45 a.m. He showered, dressed in his station blues, and drove through the quiet, pre-dawn streets with Blaze in the passenger seat, the dog's head resting on the window, ears perked, eyes scanning the world with calm alertness. The city was just waking up. Streetlights flickered off one by one. A garbage truck rumbled down an alley. A man in a hoodie jogged past with headphones in. Normal. Unremarkable. At the station, the morning briefing was uneventful. Captain Caruso went over the schedule. Equipment checks, training drills, maintenance on Engine 42. The crew was in good spirits. Jenkins told a bad joke about a priest, a rabbi, and a firefighter walking into a bar that got groans instead of laughs. Martinez complained about his kids' soccer schedule and how parents these days were too competitive. Thompson fell asleep during the mandatory safety video about ladder safety and got a protein bar thrown at his head by Jenkins. Normal, routine, safe. Ryan spent the afternoon running drills with Blaze. Search patterns, obstacle courses, scent discrimination exercises. The dog performed flawlessly, as always, focused, disciplined, reliable. They worked in the training yard behind the station, a patch of dirt and concrete littered with old pallets, tires, and makeshift structures designed to simulate collapsed buildings. Ryan hid a mannequin under a pile of debris and gave the command, "Search!" Blaze's nose went to the ground immediately, sweeping left to right in methodical patterns. Within 90 seconds, he'd located the target and barked twice, the signal for a find. Ryan rewarded him with praise and a tennis ball, Blaze's favorite. The dog's tail wagged, his eyes bright with satisfaction. But there was something different that day, something Ryan couldn't quite name. Between drills, Blaze was restless. He paced along the fence line, ears swiveling constantly, tracking sounds Ryan couldn't hear. His nose twitched, testing the air for something unseen, and when Ryan called him over for a water break, Blaze hesitated, just for a second, before obeying. "You okay, boy?" Ryan asked, scratching behind the dog's ears. Blaze leaned into the touch, but his eyes remained distant, alert, scanning the horizon. Ryan shrugged it off. Dogs had instincts. Sometimes they picked up on things humans missed. Thunder brewing on the horizon. An earthquake hours away, a shift in the wind. Animals sensed things science couldn't always explain. Whatever it was, Blaze would be fine. But that night, as Ryan lay in his bunk with Blaze curled at the foot of the bed, the dog didn't sleep. His eyes stayed open, watching, waiting, as if he knew something was coming. Ryan didn't sleep well either. He tossed and turned, half dreaming of smoke and fire and voices calling for help he couldn't reach. He woke twice in the night to find Blaze sitting upright, staring at the door, ears forward. The second time, Ryan sat up. "What is it, boy?" Blaze glanced at him, then back at the door. A low whine escaped his throat. Ryan listened. Silence. Nothing but the hum of the refrigerator downstairs and the distant sound of traffic on the highway. "It's okay," Ryan whispered, reaching out to stroke the dog's head. "Go to sleep." But Blaze didn't sleep, and neither did Ryan. When morning came, both of them were exhausted. Ryan made coffee, strong and black, and shared a bagel with Blaze in the kitchen while the rest of the crew slowly filtered in, bleary-eyed and yawning. The morning briefing was quick. Caruso seemed distracted, his phone buzzing constantly with texts from his wife about their daughter's college applications. The day stretched ahead, slow and uneventful, until 2:17 p.m. The call came in like a thunderclap. Ryan was in the apparatus bay, checking the hoses on Engine 42, running his hands along the rubber for cracks or wear, when the alert tones blared through the station. The sound was sharp, jarring, cutting through the low hum of conversation and the clatter of tools. Every firefighter in the building froze for a split second, that universal moment of transition from rest to action, then moved. Structure fire, 428 Oak Ridge Lane, possible entrapment, Multiple callers reporting smoke and flames. All units respond. Ryan's heart kicked into gear. Adrenaline flooded his system, sharpening his senses, quickening his movements. He moved on autopilot. Turnout pants yanked on in seconds, boots stamped into place, coat shrugged over his shoulders, helmet secured. His hands worked without thought, muscle memory honed by years of repetition. Gloves, radio, flashlight, halogen bar, everything in place, everything ready. Blaze was already at the truck, tail low, ears forward, eyes locked on Ryan. The dog knew. He always knew. The engine roared to life. Sirens wailed. The bay doors rolled open, flooding the space with afternoon sunlight. The truck swung out onto the street, tires squealing, lights flashing. Ryan sat in the jump seat, checking his equipment one more time. A ritual, a prayer, a promise to himself that he'd come back alive. Blaze sat beside him in his specially designed harness, strapped in, calm but alert. His breathing was steady, controlled. But Ryan could see the tension in the dog's body, the way his muscles coiled, ready to spring into action. Ryan glanced at him. "You and me, buddy, just like always." Blaze's ear twitched, but his eyes never left the road. The ride was fast. 3 minutes. Through traffic lights, around corners, past pedestrians who stopped and stared. The city blurred past the windows. Storefronts, apartment buildings, trees heavy with summer leaves. Normal life, oblivious to the emergency unfolding. The house came into view, and Ryan's stomach tightened. It was a 2-story colonial with white siding, black shutters, and a wraparound porch that looked like it belonged on a postcard from another era. But the postcard was on fire. Smoke poured from the upper windows in thick, rolling clouds that blotted out the afternoon sun. Flames licked through the roof in places, orange tongues reaching for the sky. The front door hung open, swinging slightly in the wind created by the fire's draft. A woman stood on the lawn, held back by a neighbor. She was screaming, her voice raw and broken. "My daughter! She's still inside! Emma, please, you have to get her. She's only 6. Please!" Her face was streaked with tears and soot. Her hands clawed at the air, as if she could pull her daughter out by sheer will. The neighbor holding her was pale, shaking, barely able to keep the woman from running toward the burning house. Ryan's stomach clenched. A child. Always the worst calls. Engine 42 screeched to a halt. Captain Caruso was already out of the command vehicle, his voice booming over the chaos. "Holt, take Blaze and sweep the 2nd floor. Jenkins, you're on the 1st. Thompson, get a line on that front window. Knock down the flames so they can get in. Martinez, check for a rear entrance. We've got maybe 10 minutes before this thing comes down, so move." Ryan didn't waste time. He clipped Blaze's lead, checked his mask one last time, adjusted the straps on his tank and pushed through the front door. The heat hit him like a physical blow, a wall of superheated air that stole his breath even through the mask. Inside, the world transformed into hell. The air was a shifting maze of gray and black smoke, thick enough to cut with a knife. The flames hadn't fully engulfed the ground floor yet, but they were spreading with terrifying speed, licking up the walls, consuming the furniture, filling the space with the acrid stench of burning plastic, wood, and something chemical Ryan couldn't identify. Visibility was near zero. Ryan moved by feel and instinct, one hand on Blaze's harness, the other sweeping the air ahead of him with his flashlight. The beam cut through the smoke in a weak cone of light, revealing glimpses of the destruction. A couch engulfed in flames, a staircase half consumed, walls blackened and peeling. They climbed the stairs. Each step was a test. The wood creaked and groaned under Ryan's weight, protesting the burden of 200 pounds of man and gear. The railing was hot to the touch, even through his gloves, the heat radiating through the material. Smoke churned above them, a living thing that pressed down like a physical weight, making every breath a struggle even with the mask. At the top of the stairs, Ryan paused, forcing himself to think, to assess. 3 doors, 1 bathroom, likely empty, 2 bedrooms. One of them had to hold the girl. "Search," Ryan commanded, his voice muffled by the mask but firm. Blaze moved immediately, nose to the floor, sweeping left to right in the methodical search pattern they'd practiced hundreds of times. He was pure focus now, every sense trained on finding the scent of a living human. He entered the first bedroom, a small cluttered space with a desk, a computer chair knocked over, and piles of laundry scattered across the floor. His nose swept the space in seconds. Nothing. He moved to the second bedroom, paused at the threshold, His body went rigid. He barked once, sharp and clear. Ryan followed, hope surging in his chest. The room was pink, a little girl's room. Stuffed animals lined a sagging bookshelf. Bears, rabbits, a unicorn with a missing horn. Posters of cartoon characters covered the walls. Princesses, ponies, superheroes. A bed sat against the far wall, its comforter partially burned, smoke rising from the fabric in lazy spirals. A nightstand with a lamp shaped like a star. A closet door hanging half open. Ryan scanned the space quickly, methodically. No movement, no sound. He dropped to his knees, checked under the bed. Nothing but dust and a single pink sneaker. He yanked open the closet door. Clothes, shoes, toys, but no child. "Clear!" he shouted into his radio, frustration and fear twisting in his gut like a knife. But Blaze wasn't moving. The dog stood frozen in the center of the room, head tilted at an odd angle, ears pinned back flat against his skull. His breathing quickened, coming in short, rapid pants. He barked again, short, sharp, insistent. Not his found bark, the one that meant he'd located a victim. Something else, something urgent, something desperate. Ryan frowned, stepping closer. "What is it, boy? What do you hear?" Blaze didn't look at him. His eyes were locked on the wall, the back wall of the room, blank, white, unmarked except for a faint rectangular outline barely visible beneath multiple layers of white paint, like someone had tried to hide it, to make it disappear. Ryan stepped closer, heart pounding. He pressed his gloved hand against the surface. It felt different, hollow, not solid like the rest of the walls. He rapped his knuckles against it, a dull, empty sound, a cavity behind it. His pulse quickened. "Captain, I've got something," he said into his radio, trying to keep his voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding his system. "Possible concealed space. Second floor, rear bedroom, requesting immediate backup." Static crackled. Then Caruso's voice, tight with urgency and barely controlled panic. "Make it fast, Holt. Structural integrity is failing. You've got maybe 5 minutes before the roof goes. Maybe less. 5 minutes. 300 seconds. Not enough time. Never enough time." Ryan grabbed his Halligan bar from his belt, the heavy prying tool every firefighter carried, and wedged the forked end into the outline. The plaster cracked under the pressure, spider-webbing outward. He pulled with all his strength. The wall resisted, groaning in protest, then gave way with a sound like a sigh, like a secret finally being told. Plaster and drywall crumbled away, revealing darkness beyond. A hidden room, a crawl space, a tomb, and from inside, cutting through the roar of flames and the chaos of destruction, a faint muffled sound reached Ryan's ears. A child's cry, weak, terrified, but alive. Ryan's stomach dropped into his boots. He yanked away more of the wall, tearing at the plaster with his gloved hands, ignoring the sharp edges cutting into the fabric, adrenaline making him strong. The opening widened, revealing a narrow crawl space no bigger than a walk-in closet. The air inside was cooler, untouched by the flames for now. But it wouldn't stay that way long. The fire was spreading with exponential speed, consuming oxygen, and the heat was rising steadily, relentlessly. And there, curled in the far corner like a discarded doll, was a little girl. She couldn't have been more than 6 years old. Blonde hair matted with sweat and grime, plastered to her pale forehead. Clothes dirty and torn. A pink nightgown with cartoon characters, now grey with soot. Her eyes were half open, unfocused, glazed with fear and exhaustion. Her breathing was shallow, labored, each breath a small, painful gasp. She didn't move when Ryan entered, didn't speak, just stared at him with a look that was equal parts terror and resignation, as if she'd given up hoping for rescue. "I got her!" Ryan shouted into his radio, his voice cracking with relief and horror. "Second floor, concealed room, 1 juvenile victim, female, approximately 6 years old, responsive but lethargic. I'm bringing her out now." He reached in carefully, sliding his arms under her small, fragile frame, lifting her as gently as he could. She was light, too light. Her child should have more weight, more substance. Her skin was pale, clammy to the touch even through his gloves. Her pulse, when he checked it against her neck, was weak and rapid, the flutter of a trapped bird's heart. Blaze barked, circling Ryan's legs in tight, agitated patterns, urging him to move, to hurry, his instincts screaming danger. "Good boy," Ryan whispered, his voice barely audible over the roar of the fire. "We're getting out. We're getting her out." But as he turned toward the door, towards safety and light and air, the floor beneath them buckled with a sound like a gunshot. A sharp, splintering crack echoed through the house, followed by a groan of tortured wood. The ceiling above them sagged visibly, beams bending under the weight of the collapsing roof. Chunks of drywall and insulation rained down, along with embers that glowed like fireflies in the smoke. The flames were spreading faster now, no longer confined to the ground floor but crawling up the walls like living serpents, hungry and relentless, consuming everything in their path. The smoke thickened, turning from grey to black, choking out what little breathable air remained. Ryan could barely see 2 feet ahead. His flashlight was useless, the beams swallowed by the darkness. He moved by instinct and training, holding the girl close to his chest, tucking her head against his shoulder, shielding her small body with his own. Blaze led the way, his form barely visible through the smoke, but his barking constant, a lifeline, a beacon cutting through the chaos. They reached the top of the stairs. The steps were worse than before, scorched black, cracked in multiple places, barely holding together. Ryan tested each one before putting his full weight on it, moving as quickly as he dared, but knowing that one wrong step could send them both plummeting into the inferno below. His lungs burned even through the mask. Sweat poured down his face, stinging his eyes, blurring his already limited vision. The heat was overwhelming, pressing against him from all sides, baking him inside his gear. Halfway down the staircase, disaster struck. The step beneath Ryan's left foot gave way with a sickening crack, splintering into pieces. His leg plunged through the gap. He stumbled, catching himself on the railing with his free hand. The railing bent under his weight, screws pulling loose from the wall with a screech of metal on wood, but it held, barely. The girl slipped in his arms. He adjusted his grip frantically, his heart hammering so hard he could hear it over the roar of the fire, over the screaming of his radio, over everything. "Hold on, sweetheart," he gasped, more to himself than to her. "Just hold on." Blaze was already on the ground floor, all 4 paws planted, head up, barking frantically, his voice hoarse and desperate. The sound cut through Ryan's panic, gave him focus. He pulled his leg free, ignored the pain shooting through his knee and continued down, step by agonizing step. The front door was visible now, a rectangle of blessed daylight through the smoke, salvation just feet away, 10 feet, 8, 6. Then the world exploded. The roof caved in behind them with a roar like the end of the world. The sound was deafening, splintering wood, crashing metal, collapsing stone, all mixing into one overwhelming cacophony of destruction. The entire second floor folded inward, collapsing on itself, sending a massive wave of heat and debris surging through the house like a tidal wave of fire and fury. Ryan threw himself forward with the last of his strength, tucking his body around the girl, feeling the searing heat on his back, feeling debris strike his helmet and shoulders. He hit the ground hard, momentum carrying him forward, rolling onto the front lawn as the house behind him erupted in a final, violent burst of flame that shot skyward like a funeral pyre. He gasped for air, tore off his mask with shaking hands. The girl was still in his arms, coughing weakly, crying softly, but alive. Alive. Paramedics rushed forward like a swarm, taking her from him with practiced efficiency, laying her on a gurney, attaching oxygen, checking vitals, speaking in calm, professional tones that contrasted sharply with the chaos around them. Ryan collapsed onto his back, chest heaving, every muscle screaming in protest, staring up at the afternoon sky. His vision swam, black spots danced at the edges, but he was alive. They were alive. Blaze stood over him, panting hard, his coat singed in places, but his eyes clear and calm. The dog's tail wagged slowly, a sign of relief, of satisfaction at a job completed. "Good boy," Ryan whispered, his voice barely audible, raw from smoke and exertion. "You saved her. You saved that little girl." But even as he said it, even as his team surrounded him, clapping him on the back, congratulating him, calling him a hero, a question gnawed at the edges of his mind, refusing to be silenced. Why had the girl been in a hidden room? Who had put her there? And why? The house was a total loss. By the time the flames were fully extinguished, by the time the last ember had been drowned and the last hotspot cooled, only the skeletal frame remained, blackened beams jutting into the sky like accusing fingers, collapsed walls reduced to piles of charred rubble, and the acrid smell of destruction hanging in the air like a curse that wouldn't lift. The girl, whose name was Emma Whitmore, was taken to St. Michael's Hospital for observation and treatment. Smoke inhalation, dehydration, minor burns on her hands and feet, severe emotional trauma, but alive, against all odds, alive. Her mother, Sarah Whitmore, age 32, was inconsolable but grateful. She clung to Ryan's hand outside the ambulance, her fingers digging into his skin, tears streaming down her face, mascara running in black streaks, her voice broken and hoarse from screaming. "You saved her," she sobbed, her whole body shaking. "You saved my baby. I don't know how to thank you. I can't." Ryan nodded, his throat tight, unable to find words. But his mind was elsewhere. He kept thinking about the hidden room, about the way it had been concealed, deliberately, carefully, with multiple layers of paint to hide the seams, about the way Emma had been inside, alone, in the dark, locked away from the world, imprisoned. That night, back at Station 42, Ryan sat in the break room with a cup of coffee gone cold in his hands and a head full of questions that wouldn't quiet. The other firefighters had congratulated him, clapped him on the back, called him a hero. Jenkins had made a joke about Ryan walking through walls like a superhero. Thompson had offered to buy him a beer. Martinez had taken a photo for the station's Facebook page. But Ryan didn't feel like a hero. Heroes felt satisfaction, accomplishment, pride. Ryan felt sick. Blaze lay at his feet, exhausted but alert, his eyes following Ryan's every tiny movement. The dog's coat had been checked by the department vet. Minor singeing, nothing serious. He'd been given water, food, and a clean bill of health, but Ryan could see the tension still lingering in the animal's body, the way his ears swiveled at every sound, the way his breathing remained just slightly elevated. The dog knew something was wrong too. Captain Caruso walked in around midnight, clipboard in hand, his face lined with exhaustion and something else. Concern, maybe, or suspicion. He pulled out a chair and sat down heavily across from Ryan. "Hell of a job today, Holt," he said quietly. "Thanks, Cap." Caruso studied him for a long moment. "You okay?" Ryan looked up, meeting his captain's eyes. "That room, the hidden one. Did you see the photos?" "I saw them. Fire marshal's already investigating. Structural team went through what's left of the building this evening." "And?" Caruso set the clipboard down on the table with a soft thud. His expression was unreadable, carefully neutral in the way that meant he was thinking hard about what to say. "And it's weird, Holt. Really weird. The room was sealed from the outside. No windows, no ventilation, no light source. Just a hollow space behind the wall, maybe 4 feet by 6 feet. Barely big enough for a child to stand up in." Ryan's jaw tightened, muscles bunching. Someone put her in there. Caruso didn't respond right away. When he did, his voice was low, careful, measured. "We don't know that yet. Not officially." "Then why was she in there, Cap? Kids don't build hidden rooms and lock themselves inside." "I'm not saying you're wrong, Holt. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying we need to let the authorities handle this now. This isn't a fire investigation anymore. This is police business. Maybe criminal. Maybe." Ryan's voice rose slightly. "Cap, that girl was locked in a hidden room during a house fire. That's not maybe. That's..." "I know," Caruso interrupted gently but firmly. "I know what it looks like, and that's exactly why we need to let the professionals handle it. The police, social services, people trained for this kind of thing. Our job was to get her out alive. We did that. The rest isn't on us." But Ryan couldn't let it go. Couldn't stop thinking about Emma's pale, terrified face, about the way she hadn't moved, hadn't spoken, as if she'd been waiting to die, about the scratch marks on the inside of that door that Caruso hadn't mentioned, but that Ryan had seen in the split second before he'd lifted her out. Someone had locked that child in that room, and someone needed to answer for it. That night, Ryan couldn't sleep. He lay in his bunk staring at the ceiling, watching shadows move across the tiles, replaying the rescue in his mind on an endless loop. The wall, the crawl space, Emma's small, broken body. The way Blaze had known, had sensed something wrong before Ryan had even understood what he was looking at. Around 3 in the morning, Ryan gave up on sleep. He got up, pulled on jeans and a t-shirt, and went to the kitchen, made coffee, stood at the window watching the city sleep, lights twinkling in the distance like earthbound stars. Blaze followed him as he always did, padding silently across the floor on his big paws. The dog sat beside Ryan, pressed his warm body against Ryan's leg and waited. "Something's wrong, isn't it, boy?" Ryan whispered into the darkness. "Something bad." Blaze's tail thumped once against the floor. Ryan made a decision. The next morning, before his shift started, he made a call. Detective Laura Chen was a friend, a sharp, no-nonsense investigator with the city's Special Victims Unit who specialized in cases involving children. She was in her early 40s, with short black hair shot through with silver, keen eyes that missed nothing, and a reputation for being relentless when she caught the scent of injustice. Ryan had worked with her before on cases involving arson and child endangerment, back when he'd been called to testify about fire patterns and entry points. If anyone could get to the truth about Emma Whitmore, it was Laura Chen. "Laura, I need a favor," Ryan said without preamble when she answered. "Let me guess. The Oak Ridge fire." Her voice was professional, clipped but not unfriendly. "You heard?" "Everyone's heard, Ryan. You're all over the news. Channel 5 ran your story as their lead last night. You're a hero. Again." "I'm not calling about that. I'm calling about the girl, Emma." There was a pause on the other end of the line, longer than comfortable. "What about her?" "She was in a hidden room, sealed from the outside, locked in. I need to know why." Another pause. Ryan could almost hear Laura thinking, weighing her words. "Ryan, this is an active investigation. I can't share details with civilians. You know that." "I know. But I was there. I saw it. Laura, something's not right. That room wasn't an accident. Someone put her there." Laura sighed deeply, the sound of someone who'd seen too much darkness in her career and knew exactly what Ryan was talking about. "I'll look into it, but off the record, okay? Don't go playing detective. Don't talk to the family. Don't do anything stupid. Let us handle this professionally." "I won't," Ryan promised. But even as he said it, even as he hung up the phone and went through the motions of his day, drills, equipment checks, cleaning the truck, he knew he was lying. Because some things you couldn't let go. Some things demanded answers. And this was one of them. 3 days passed. 3 days of routine calls. A car accident, a false alarm, a dumpster fire behind a restaurant. 3 days of Ryan going through the motions while his mind churned with questions he couldn't answer. And then Laura called back. "You were right," she said without preamble, her voice tight, clipped, the voice she used when she was trying to keep her emotions in check and not quite succeeding. "Something's very, very wrong with this case." Ryan's grip on the phone tightened until his knuckles went white. "Tell me." "Emma's mother, Sarah Whitmore, has a boyfriend. Guy named Marcus Webb, age 35. He moved in about 6 months ago. On paper, he's clean, no priors, no arrests, no history. Works as a warehouse supervisor, pays his taxes, everything looks normal. But Emma's been missing school, a lot. Multiple absences over the past 3 months, at least 15 days. Teachers flagged it to the school administration. The guidance counselor tried to call home several times, got vague excuses. They notified Child Protective Services. Ryan's stomach churned with growing dread. And CPS tried to do a home visit. Twice. Both times, Sarah answered the door, said Emma was sick with the flu, with a cold, with stomach issues. Sent them away without letting them see the child. CPS put it on the list for a follow-up visit, but it got buried, Ryan finished, anger rising in his throat like bile. Budget cuts, understaffing, 60 cases per social worker. You know how it goes. By the time anyone thought to check again, the fire had already happened. Laura's voice was heavy with frustration and guilt, the guilt of a system that failed and the people who had to work within it. Ryan closed his eyes, pressing his free hand against his forehead. What about the room? What did forensics find? Laura's voice grew even colder, more clinical, as if distance could protect her from the horror of what she was describing. "We brought in a forensic team yesterday. Processed what's left of the structure. The space was used recently and repeatedly. We found a thin blanket with cartoon characters, frozen, I think, an empty water bottle, granola bar wrappers, and Ryan, there were scratch marks on the inside of the door, deep ones, like someone had been trying to claw their way out." Ryan felt his stomach drop, felt rage surge through him, hot and sharp and blinding. She was locked in there. How long? We don't know yet. But based on the evidence, the biological matter we found, the wear patterns, the accumulated dust and debris, it wasn't the first time, maybe not even the 10th time. Ryan's hand clenched into a fist. His voice came out as a growl. "Where's Marcus now?" "That's the thing. He disappeared. The day after the fire, he packed a bag and left. Told Sarah he was going to visit his brother in Nevada. Sarah claims she doesn't know where he is, says she hasn't heard from him, but we're not buying it. We've got an APB out. All neighboring states, bus stations, airports, we'll find him." "What about Emma? How is she?" Laura's voice softened slightly. "She's safe. We pulled her from Sarah's custody immediately. She's in protective placement with an emergency foster family. Good people, Ryan. Experienced with trauma cases, but here's the thing. Emma's not talking. At all. Whatever happened to her, However long this went on, she's completely shut down. Won't speak, barely eats, flinches at loud sounds. The psychologist says it's going to be a long road. Ryan thanked Laura and hung up. He sat in the silence of his small apartment, fists clenched, jaw tight, muscles coiled with impotent rage. This was the part of the job they never prepared you for. The aftermath, the knowledge that you'd saved a life but couldn't undo the damage that had been done before you arrived. Blaze sat beside him, as he always did, resting his head on Ryan's knee. The dog's eyes were calm, steady, patient, as if he understood the weight Ryan carried, as if he was saying without words, "We did what we could. We saved her. That has to be enough." But was it enough? Could it ever be enough? "We're not done yet, boy," Ryan whispered into the quiet room, and he meant it. 4 days after the fire, on a humid Tuesday afternoon when the air felt thick enough to swim through, Laura called again. This time, her voice was different, urgent, almost triumphant. "We found Marcus." Ryan's pulse quickened, adrenaline flooding his system. "Where?" "Greyhound station downtown. He was trying to board a bus to Phoenix with a fake ID, not even a good fake, just a photocopy job he probably did at Kinko's, and $2,000 in cash stuffed in a backpack. Transit police spotted him from the APB photo. We brought him in for questioning 3 hours ago." "And?" Ryan's heart was pounding now. "He broke. Took about 2.5 hours, but he broke. Started crying, saying he never meant to hurt anyone, that things just got out of hand. Admitted to locking Emma in the room when she misbehaved. His word, misbehaved. Said it was discipline. Said she was a problem child, always causing trouble, always whining, always getting in the way. Said the room was a time-out space to help her learn to be quiet and obedient." Ryan felt sick. How long would he leave her there? Hours, sometimes overnight. Once, according to his statement, for almost 2 days. He'd give her a water bottle and a granola bar and tell her to think about what she'd done wrong. And Sarah? Ryan's voice was barely above a whisper. "Did she know?" "Marcus says yes. Says Sarah knew the whole time. That they'd argued about it, but that she ultimately went along with it because she didn't want him to leave. Sarah's denying everything. Claims she had no idea. That Marcus must have done it when she was at work, that she never would have allowed it. But Ryan, we found text messages between them. Arguments about Emma. Marcus threatening to leave if Sarah didn't deal with her daughter. Sarah pleading with him to stay, promising to do better to keep Emma quiet. Ryan's blood boiled. His hands shook with rage. So she chose him over her own kid. Looks that way. We're charging them both. Marcus with multiple counts of child endangerment, false imprisonment, reckless endangerment and assault. Sarah with complicity, child neglect, and failure to protect. The DA thinks they can make the charges stick. Ryan let out a slow breath, trying to process it all, trying to understand how a mother could do that to her own child. Is Emma okay? She's going to be. It'll take time, a lot of time and therapy and patience, but she's strong, Ryan. Stronger than anyone has a right to be at 6 years old. The foster family she's with, the Rodriguezes, they're wonderful, patient, experienced with traumatized kids. And Ryan, Laura paused. She asked about you. She wanted to say thank you. To you and to Blaze. Ryan's throat tightened, emotion threatening to overwhelm him. I didn't do anything. You did everything. You listened to your dog when any other person would have evacuated. You trusted your instincts. You refused to leave her behind. You saved her life, Ryan, don't diminish that. But Ryan knew the truth. It wasn't him. It was Blaze. The dog had sensed something was wrong when no human could. He had refused to leave, had clawed at that wall with a desperation that defied explanation, had saved a little girl's life through sheer stubborn determination. A week later, on a Saturday morning when the weather had finally broken and the air smelled clean and fresh after a night of rain, Ryan visited Emma at her foster home. The house was in a quiet suburban neighborhood, tree-lined streets, well-kept lawns, children's bikes lying in driveways. The Rodriguez home was a cheerful yellow with white trim, a big backyard visible through a side gate, and flowers in window boxes that reminded Ryan of his grandmother's house. Mrs. Rodriguez, a kind-faced woman in her 50s with warm brown eyes and graying hair pulled back in a bun, greeted him at the door with a smile that reached all the way to her eyes. "Captain Holt, we've been expecting you. Emma's been so excited. She's in the backyard. Please come in." Ryan followed her through a house that smelled like cinnamon and vanilla, homemade cookies, he guessed, past a living room with comfortable furniture and family photos on every surface, to a sliding glass door that opened onto a large, fenced backyard. Emma was sitting on a wooden bench under an old oak tree, her small legs swinging, not quite reaching the ground. She wore clean clothes, jeans and a purple t-shirt with a butterfly on it, and her hair had been washed and brushed into 2 neat pigtails tied with yellow ribbons. She looked different from the pale, terrified child Ryan had pulled from the flames. There was color in her cheeks now, a spark in her eyes. When she saw Blaze, her whole face lit up like the sun breaking through clouds. She slid off the bench and ran toward them, not hesitant, not afraid, and dropped to her knees in the grass in front of the dog. Blaze stood perfectly still, patient and calm, as she wrapped her small arms around his neck and buried her face in his fur. "He found me," she whispered, her voice muffled, trembling with emotion. "I was so scared. It was so dark. And then I heard him barking, and he found me." Ryan knelt beside her, his own eyes stinging with tears he refused to let fall. "He's a very good dog, the best dog I've ever known." Emma looked up at him with those wide blue eyes that had seen far too much darkness for someone so young. Tears streamed down her cheeks, but she was smiling, a real smile, genuine and bright. "Thank you for not leaving me," she said softly. "Thank you for listening to him." Ryan reached out and gently brushed a tear from her cheek. "We'll always listen. That's a promise." They stayed for an hour. Emma showed them her new room, pink walls, a bookshelf full of books, a window with flowered curtains that let in the sunlight. She introduced them to her new stuffed animals, a bear named Mr. Buttons and a rabbit named Fluffy. She was still quiet, still healing, but there was hope there, a future. As Ryan and Blaze left, Mrs. Rodriguez walked them to the door. "She has nightmares," the woman said quietly, "every night. But last night, after we told her you were coming to visit, she slept through till morning for the first time since she came to us. You gave her hope, Captain Holt. You and that beautiful dog. You gave her a reason to believe the world isn't all darkness." Ryan nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. In the truck, driving back to the station, Ryan reached over and scratched Blaze behind the ears. The dog's tail thumped against the seat. "You did good, boy," Ryan whispered. "How you did so good." And for the first time since the fire, Ryan felt something like peace settling over him. The trial was swift and, in the end, just. Marcus Webb was sentenced to 12 years in state prison for multiple counts of child endangerment, false imprisonment, reckless endangerment, and assault. Sarah Whitmore received 5 years for complicity, child neglect, and failure to protect. The judge's words during sentencing were scathing, a public condemnation of 2 people who had betrayed the most sacred trust, the protection of a child. Emma's testimony, though brief and delivered via video link to spare her the trauma of facing her abusers in person, was devastating in its simplicity and honesty. She spoke in a small, quiet voice about months of isolation, about being locked away whenever Marcus was angry or whenever she'd done something wrong, talking too loud, laughing, asking for food when it wasn't mealtime. She spoke of being told she was bad, that she deserved punishment, that no one would ever love a problem child like her. But she also spoke of hope, of the sound of barking cutting through the smoke and fear, of the light breaking through the wall, of the strong arms that had lifted her and carried her to safety, of the man and the dog who had refused to leave her behind when leaving would have been easier, safer, more logical. The courtroom was silent when she finished, a heavy, profound silence filled with collective shame and sorrow. Ryan sat in the gallery, Blaze at his feet, where the judge had granted special permission for the service dog to attend. Blaze's head was high, his posture alert, but calm. He didn't need recognition, didn't need applause or medals. He had done what he was trained to do, what his instincts had driven him to do. He had saved a life. After the trial, life returned to a semblance of normalcy, or what passed for normal in the life of a firefighter. Ryan went back to Station 42. The calls kept coming with metronomic regularity: structure fires, car accidents, medical emergencies, false alarms. Blaze continued to perform flawlessly, finding people trapped under debris, locating victims in smoke-filled buildings, being the hero he was meant to be. But something had changed between them. Some invisible bond had deepened. Ryan looked at Blaze differently now, not just as a partner or a tool or even a friend, as something more fundamental, a reminder of what mattered, a living embodiment of loyalty, courage, and the simple truth that sometimes the most important thing you can do is refuse to give up. Refuse to walk away, even when every logical voice in your head is screaming at you to save yourself. Blaze had taught him that, had shown him in the most visceral way possible that trust, real trust, the kind built slowly over time through shared experiences and mutual respect, was worth more than any amount of training or equipment or expertise. 6 months after the trial, on a crisp autumn evening when the leaves were turning golden red and the air smelled like wood smoke and approaching winter, Ryan received a letter. It was handwritten in careful, childish script on lined paper, decorated with stickers of butterflies and flowers. The envelope was addressed simply, "To Captain Ryan and Blaze." Ryan opened it carefully, his hands strangely nervous. "Dear Captain Ryan and Blaze, Mrs. Rodriguez is helping me write this letter because I want to make sure I say everything right. I want to say thank you again for saving me. I think about you every day. I think about how brave you were and how Blaze wouldn't leave even when it was scary. I'm doing better now. I still have bad dreams sometimes, but not as much. I'm going to a new school and I have friends. Mrs. Rodriguez says I can stay with her forever if I want to. She's teaching me to bake cookies. I want to be brave like you when I grow up. I want to help people who are scared. Mrs. Rodriguez says maybe I can work with animals like Blaze because animals are good at helping people feel safe. Thank you for not giving up on me. Thank you for listening to Blaze when he knew I was there. I love you both." Emma Ryan read the letter 3 times, each time feeling the tightness in his chest grow stronger. He folded it carefully, placed it in his locker at the station, and kept it there. A reminder, a talisman, a promise. That evening, as the sun set over the city in streaks of orange and purple, Ryan sat outside the station with Blaze beside him. The dog rested his head on Ryan's lap, eyes half closed, content in the simple pleasure of being near his human. "You knew, didn't you?" Ryan whispered, scratching behind the dog's scarred ears. "You knew she was there. You knew she needed us. You knew when I didn't." Blaze's tail thumped once against the pavement, a simple acknowledgement or maybe just a reflex, but Ryan chose to believe it was the former. "Good boy. You're such a good boy." And in that moment, as the world continued spinning and the city hummed with life and the stars began to appear one by one in the darkening sky, Ryan felt something he hadn't felt in a long time: gratitude, peace, purpose. Some lives were worth saving. All lives, really. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, you got to be the one who saved them. Years later, when Ryan's hair had gone grey at the temples and his knees ached on cold mornings, he would think back on that day, the day Blaze refused to leave a burning house. He would remember the smoke thick enough to choke on, the heat that threatened to melt his gear, the sound of Blaze's desperate barking cutting through the chaos. He would remember the hidden room revealed like a terrible secret finally told. He would remember Emma's pale face, her small body trembling, her eyes that had seen too much darkness. He would remember the moment he realized that the most important thing you can do, the only thing that truly matters, is to listen, to trust, to follow those who see what you cannot. Emma Whitmore grew up strong and resilient, a testament to the human capacity for healing and hope. She went to college on a scholarship, majored in social work, and dedicated her life to helping children who had been silenced, forgotten, overlooked, abused. She worked for Child Protective Services, became a fierce advocate for reform, for better funding, for more workers and smaller caseloads. She never forgot where she came from, never forgot what it felt like to be abandoned, to be worthless in the eyes of those who should have protected her. And she never ever forgot the dog who saved her. Every year on the anniversary of the fire, August 14th, she visited Ryan, first at Station 42, then later at his home after he retired. She would bring flowers, sunflowers, because they reminded her of hope and light. She would tell him stories about the children she'd helped, the families she'd reunited, the policies she'd changed, and she would always ask about Blaze. Blaze lived to be 12 years old, a long life for a working dog, a life filled with purpose and love and the satisfaction of work well done. When age finally caught up with him, when his hips gave out and his eyes grew cloudy and his breathing became labored, Ryan made the hardest decision of his life. He held Blaze as the veterinarian administered the injection, whispering thank you over and over into the dog's graying fur, telling him what a good boy he was, what a brave boy, what a hero. Blaze's tail wagged once weakly, and then he was gone. Ryan buried him in his backyard under an oak tree with a headstone that read simply, Blaze, hero, partner, friend, you saved more than lives, you saved souls. Emma came to the funeral, because yes, there was a funeral, attended by dozens of firefighters and people whose lives Blaze had touched. She placed a single sunflower on the grave and cried, not tears of sadness, but tears of gratitude. Years passed. Ryan grew older. Emma built a career, eventually became a director at CPS, changed countless lives. The world kept turning, as it always does, but the story endured. It was told at the fire academy to new recruits learning about search and rescue protocols. It was featured in documentaries about heroic animals. It was written about in newspapers and blogs and books about the bond between humans and dogs. And always, the message was the same. Sometimes heroes don't wear badges or uniforms. Sometimes they walk on four paws with scarred muzzles and eyes like molten amber. Sometimes they refuse to leave, even when the world is burning around them, even when every instinct screams to run, to save themselves, to give up. Sometimes they know with a certainty that transcends language and logic that a life is worth saving, that every life is worth saving, that giving up is not an option. And if we're wise, if we're brave enough, humble enough, open enough, we learn to listen to them, to trust them, to follow them into the darkness because they see light where we see only shadows. That's what Blaze taught Ryan. That's what Ryan taught Emma. And that's what Emma spent her life teaching others. Never give up, never walk away, never stop fighting for those who cannot fight for themselves. Because somewhere in the darkness, someone is waiting, someone is hoping, someone is praying for a second chance, for a voice, for a hand reaching through the smoke. And maybe, just maybe, if we listen carefully enough, if we trust deeply enough, if we love fiercely enough, we'll be the ones to find them.